Welcome back to another episode of the Jacob Johnston Show. You know, Reagan once said that the closest thing to immortality is a government program. It doesn't matter what the government program is. It doesn't matter if it's outlived its usefulness or if it's been proven to cause more problems than it solves. It never goes away once it's implemented. It doesn't matter what the facts are. One side will always be playing politics, trying to say that if you try to repeal this program, you're going to hurt the poor. You're targeting minorities. You're, whatever identity politics argument that they will do in order to justify keeping the program in place, even if that program is used by virtually nobody. Because the left will still use the fact that that program exists in order to have some sort of group claiming to be working towards the goal of that program so that they continue to get money so they don't have to get real jobs. And then they'll take that money and they'll use it to donate to Democrats. Now, the program could have been bad from the start, like Obamacare, which sucks and has caused nothing but financial hardship on everybody, raised the cost of medical services. In fact, most government programs go off and they increase costs on everybody. And most people don't even know about all the government programs, what they do, and what results they actually get. All they hear is the political narrative. If you're a leftist, all you need to hear is the mainstream media trying to sell whatever BS the Democrats are trying to, sell to the American people. The Democrats issue their marching orders, and then the media goes off and repeats those marching orders. And the big tech overlords go off and promote anybody who supports the Democrats' views and censors and shadow bans, or basically goes off and deplatforms anybody who tries to get out there and disagree with the Democrats. Well, okay, maybe not everybody. Apparently the left has an approved list of conservatives who offer a sense that there is an alternative view, but will still tell everyone to just, sit down, roll over, don't do nothing, but maybe show up and vote. The people that the left promotes as conservative voices. And you've heard me talk about that in the past, where I have my problem with so-called conservative voices, conservative leaders, those who have massive audiences, and yet basically, while they'll go off and say a few things, they won't cross the lines that the Democrats set. And they'll always tell you, there's nothing you can really do. Sit down, shut up, and try and, beat them next time at the ballot box. Meanwhile, the Democrats go out there and get whatever they want by violently rioting. Now, I'm not advocating that we violently riot, but I'm saying here that if we don't have free and fair elections, showing up at the ballot box doesn't really do a whole lot, because how we vote doesn't matter. It's who counts the votes and how they count the votes. But I digress. So on government programs here, what do you get? You get something like Obamacare. It has inflicted a lot of pain and hardship. And the government programs screw you in two ways, but yet people will still support them so long as they are told to by whatever political party they claim to support. But these government programs are part of why the national debt has exploded and why your financial hardship is increasing upon the American people. And you're getting screwed two different ways if you live in a Democrat state. In Democrat states, they're marked by high taxes, loads of regulation, which means high prices. The more you tax businesses, because taxing businesses is a tax on you. The businesses, they don't pay taxes. You pay the taxes. They're just collecting taxes from you to send to the government. They're just the middleman. And so as they raise taxes on businesses, that just costs you more money through higher prices for products and services. And when they go through and increase regulations, they're increasing expenses on the business, to which they pass those expenses on to you. So you get higher prices. But then you take a look at the national debt, and you realize that the national debt is devaluing the currency as well. The more debt that the government takes out, the more money they have to print in order to be able to pay off that debt. But the more money they print, the less the valuable the money is, the less products and services it can buy. So what does that do? That increases prices as well. So you're getting screwed two different ways here. Through the government destroying the value of the money you have, destroying its purchasing power. Meanwhile, they're also going off, when the Democrats are in charge, trying to raise prices on everything. So they're raising prices and destroying the value of the currency. And then you got people out there trying to say, oh, we need $15 minimum wage. Well, on the one hand, you wouldn't need a $15 minimum wage if the government would stop destroying the value of the dollar while also trying to heavily increase the operating expenses of businesses. But we take a look at some areas of the country run by the Democrats where they have raised the minimum wage in their state to $15 an hour. And what do we see? We see that the price of living, the cost of living, has doubled. Basic things like food prices doubled, gas prices doubled, housing and rent astronomical. But they act like they did something for you, when in reality, the end result is the same. You're not able to afford any more products and services than what you were before. Because while they're trying to trick you into thinking, oh, I'm dealing with larger numbers, the numbers don't count. The numbers don't matter. You can give everybody $1 million an hour as a wage, but that means the prices of everything is going to go up to the point where that $1 million an hour isn't going to afford any more products and services or the ability to live comfortably than what $7.25 an hour makes right now. It's not how much you make. It's the value of what you make that matters. And once you get that through your head, you'll start paying attention to what the government's doing. You'll start paying attention to all these government programs and going, do we really need that? Do we really need that program? And then you'll be taking a look at how much debt they take out and go, yeah, I don't think we should be doing that. In your own personal life, think about it like this. You got a credit card. You go off and you use it. The more you use it, the more that income that you have goes towards paying that debt. That means you have less money. It's the same concept, except the only difference is with the government being able to print money instead of more of their income going towards the debt, they just destroy the value of that debt by destroying the value of the dollar. And so when we take a look at all these government programs and we realize they never get repealed, why would we keep adding more programs that are only destructive to the economy, destructive and destroying our ability to afford basic living and comfortable living, and only serve really to benefit the leftist donor class, that only serve to grow the power of government and feed their own ego? Because most of the money that they use for these programs don't actually go towards the programs. They go towards the bureaucracy, to fund the bureaucracy that largely will donate back to Democrat campaigns or to private organizations that eat up most of the money and, of course, operating costs, salaries, spending money on themselves, and donating back to the Democrats. So we don't want any more government programs. Okay, so the left-wing media is caught in another round of fake news using the same tired tactics as they always do. So let's go ahead and see what the newest round of fake news is.
The Washington Post, the New York Times, and NBC News all reported last Thursday that the FBI had briefed Rudy Giuliani, President Trump's lawyer at the time, that he was the target of a Russian disinformation campaign during his efforts to dig up information on Joe Biden back in 2019. They said, according to this report, that he had received that briefing, a quote-unquote defensive briefing, and then traveled to Ukraine anyway. The implication being that he knowingly was involved in some Russian disinformation campaign. So all of those stories were independently confirmed by each one of those outlets. And we've seen this happen time and time again with Russiagate. I have confirmed from this source. I have confirmed. Usually what it is that one source leaks a BS story to one outlet, and then everybody else calls the same guy or the same girl, whomever, and they say, oh yeah, it's totally true. And based on that one thing, then it proliferates, and it gives it the veneer of authenticity of like, well, God, it's not just the Washington Post reporting it, it's the New York Times reporting it, and it's NBC News reporting it, and then it just goes everywhere. And then it turns out this thing is totally and completely false.
So yeah, they're right. You know, when I take a look at Rising and Hill TV, it's kind of frustrating because on the one hand, sometimes they reveal the truth. They go off and they expose media corruption. And on the other hand, they go off and they promote far left, crazy Bernie Sanders policies. So, you know, it's kind of one of those things where half the things they say is like, okay, yes. And the other half is, oh my God, you are complete lunatics. You know, it's kind of one of those frustrating things when you go off and you see a story coming from the Hill TV, the Rising. You know, you don't know whether or not, based off of the title or the particular episode, whether they're going to go far left crazy or expose corruption. But let's go off and say what they had gone through and informed us. Yes, the media gets caught in this all the time, where you got one person who wants to be left anonymous so that you can't judge who they are, what their motivations are, their credibility. And the media just wants to go off and say, hey, this source says, and they want you to believe that source. But you can't go off and determine their believability because they won't let you know who it is. And then all these media outlets all go off and claim anonymous source. We have confirmed with an anonymous source, but they're all just going to the same person who 9 out of 10 times the anonymous source is a complete and total liar. All right, so we got that when it comes to, you know, how all these fake stories, fake narratives get developed, and all of this whole Russia, Trump, and how it led to the Mueller investigation, which was completely baseless. They all just went off and said anonymous source. Now we have to just assume and just believe them that such a source exists, and it's not just the media making it up out of thin air. But once one organization, claims that, hey, we got an anonymous source that says this bad thing about Republicans, they all repeat it, and they just all go to the same source and then say, hey, we verified it. This is how fake news and gaslighting works, and the left does it all the time. But this also gets to a bigger point here. The left's use of Russia, which is their go-to whenever just being able to blatantly say, oh, this is racist and sexist and all that doesn't fit the particular situation, or is just so overused that they need to throw in a little something else. So they've gone through and they basically have decided that any scandal that the Democrats get caught up in is Russian disinformation. And the moment they claim Russian disinformation, what happens? The media parrots it, just says Russian disinformation, but never actually discuss what the scandal is and what the evidence of the scandal is. They just want to say it's Russian disinformation. And then, of course, as they say that, what happens? Facebook, Twitter, the social media tyrants go off and they suppress the story, block you from being able to post links to the story, so on and so forth. So you get complete and total censorship and the gaslighting that, yes, it is Russian disinformation, but you never get to see what the facts and the evidence are. And that is by design. Now, I wish I could go off here and say that, yes, the Democrats created this tactic. that they were the first ones to implement this type of tactic. But really, this is a type of tactic that has been going on forever. Whenever those in power fear exposure, they go off and they try to discredit those who are trying to expose them. And even when it's not tyrants fearing being exposed for a scandal, we have seen this type of thing in the past. Throughout all of history, we see it whenever Black Lives Matter wants to try and claim that anytime a police officer is forced to defend themselves, it is police brutality. They make the claim. And therefore, once they say police brutality, you don't look at what the criminal did. The criminal pulls out a gun and shoots at the police officer. The police officers return fire. They claim police brutality. And then what happens? All the media parrots that narrative. And you never go off and look at the part of the video where the suspect was attacking the officer. Or even if they have to show it, because you can't show where the police officers actually had to defend themselves without showing what the suspect did, they always go off and ignore what the suspect did and then say, well, if you focus on the criminal actions and the violent behavior of the criminal, well, then you're a racist. We see over in Russia, they do this all the time, where anybody who is, a political threat to Putin gets accused of something. I don't know what their, Russian disinformation claim is, what their version of that is, but they go off and they do that and they use it to justify government targeting. And the Democrats do the same thing here. Once they go off and now claim that, Russian disinformation, you're promoting Russian disinformation, you're a target for Russian disinformation, they then use that as an excuse for the government to target you, to investigate you, to go to the FISA court, and where in the FISA courts they're willing to submit falsified evidence in order to get a warrant to spy on you in hopes that they will find some sort of a crime that then they can use, no matter how small, to discredit you, arrest you, and punish you for trying to expose the crimes of the Democrats. But again, this isn't anything new in human history. It goes all the way back to the Salem witch trials, where they just make the accusation, and the accusation is automatic guilt. It doesn't matter what the facts and the evidence say. None of that matters. You either confess, to which you will be punished, or you keep insisting on your innocence because you're innocent, and you still get punished as part of it. I mean, with the Salem witch trial, you were dead either way. All right? It's just, how do you want to die? Do you want to be burned at the stake or drown? That's what the choices were the moment the accusation was made. And that's what's going on here with the whole Russian disinformation. Rudy Giuliani got a hold of Hunter Biden's laptop and got the hard drive out of there. It's filled with a lot of damning information. We have seen a lot of that damning information get leaked out, to which social media companies promptly censored and blocked any links to anybody who reported about what was on the laptop. And we see this big, huge scandal where the Biden family, more accurately described as the Biden crime family, have been engaged in selling influence and selling out the country, taking money in order to implement policies that are favorable to the country that is paying them. It's a pay to play. It's the same thing that we saw with Hillary Clinton. They're all corrupt. But because we got the evidence to go off and expose them, what happens? They just claim Russian disinformation. And the FBI and the intelligence community being so corrupt that instead of actually investigating the evidence and taking a look at the crimes that were committed, are just going along with the whole, it's Russian disinformation. So now they're attacking the people who found the evidence of a crime rather than actually investigating the crime. They're targeting the political opponents of the left while actively trying to cover up the crimes of the left. We saw them do this back in 2016, 2015 with Hillary Clinton, who, by all evidence, was guilty of the crime of violating the Espionage Act. The evidence was irrefutable. But what did the left do? Well, with Obama in charge at the time, he was able to get the intelligence community, and more specifically the FBI, to help them cover up the crime. They didn't actually do an investigation. They gave everyone immunity deals. They, questioned them, but they kept no records of the questioning, by and large. And they then, when they came out and announced that they weren't going to file any charges, they basically tried rewriting the laws in order to avoid charging her with the crime that she was guilty of. And so we see this, yes, with the Democrats in charge, the FBI has been corrupted yet again. What was it, Hoover that had corrupted the FBI in the past, doing that. But, and then we had 4 years of Trump and trying to go off and trying to weed out, who all the corrupt players are. They entrenched themselves. We got a few of them, but we didn't get all of them. And now the FBI is openly corrupt again, openly not even really hiding the fact that they are nothing more than a tool of the left in which to target political opponents and in which to help cover up the crimes of the Democrats. The Democrats are basically nothing more than a criminal organization dressed up as a political party. Sickening. So basically, anymore, when the left comes out and tries to claim that something is Russian disinformation that they don't like, whatever they claim is Russian disinformation, you can pretty much now assume that it's actually true. That's where we're at. Okay. Now, of course, Facebook, engaging in censorship, are trying to justify their censorship, especially as they're going off and trying to debate whether or not to allow President Trump back onto the platform. The fact that they banned President Trump, the fact that, you take a look at the people that they ban, and you realize that, no, they are not a platform. They are a publisher. And they are a publisher with a political goal and a political narrative. And the only conservatives that are allowed on the platform and allowed to be seen on the platform are the conservatives who are compliant with the left, who will only go so far, but never actually do anything that will actually push back on the left. All right, and so now that Facebook is more and more being proven to be a publisher, well, now they're trying to go off and avoid responsibility for all the censorship by outsourcing the censorship to another organization. Partly an organization that is, part of Facebook, but technically separate, and another organization which provides input over who to censor because they're being too effective in exposing too much of what the left's all about. So let's go ahead and hear how they try to justify that.
So basically what happened is that Facebook, to deflect attention essentially from the terrible harms that we see being caused by the platform, not just in America, but across the world, set up this grandiose body called the Oversight Board. And it's appointed everybody on it, it's funding it, and it's set the terms of reference for what it can have oversight on, which is in fact very, very little at all. And so in response, we set up, there's a group of civil rights leaders and sort of leading tech scholars who got together ahead of the US election to launch the real Facebook Oversight Board, essentially an independent body body of experts, academics, and civil rights leaders to call out where they see the problems with what's happening on Facebook. And ahead of the election, that was very much that we could all see the fact that Donald Trump was using Facebook to undermine and subvert the election. And they warned and they warned and they warned. And of course, that is exactly what we saw happen. And so what's happened now is that Facebook finally, after 4 years, it banned Donald Trump from its platform. But that was after 4 years when he repeatedly, time after again, broke its own rules. But now, instead of just sort of saying, right, that's it, we have finally banned him, we acknowledge he broke the rules, it's too late, but we finally did the right thing. Instead, what they've done is they've handed over this huge decision with like enormous consequences to this sort of, as I say, this sort of board on the side, the oversight board. And you know, fundamentally, it's hugely problematic, we think, because it's just outsourcing responsibility for the problems which are on its platform.
So yeah, Facebook tries pulling this trick all the time where they go off and they try to avoid responsibility for violating Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act by saying, no, it's not them. They set up an oversight board, although they pick all the members of that board and they provide all the funding of that board. And if the funding doesn't do what Facebook wants, or if the board doesn't do what Facebook wants, Facebook will replace them. You know, so of course they're wholeheartedly controlled by Facebook, but designed to give you the veneer of an independent organization. So just like when they come up with these fact checkers, now at least the fact checkers are part of different organizations, but Facebook handpicks the fact checkers, and the fact checkers are only there not to actually check the facts, but there to justify censorship. You know, and the fact checkers often lie in their fact check. Go figure. So they go off and they have this board here, right? Now, the left doesn't like the fact that Facebook is not censoring even more. The fact that even one conservative is allowed on Facebook and able to have a page and produce, you know, a show is too much for the left. So the left tries to go off and create their own organization, which is specifically designed to pressure Facebook into engaging in more and more censorship and more violations of Section 230. And of course, being a bunch of leftists, they stack it with a bunch of left-wingers, and then they try to give themselves a fake sense of credibility. They go, oh, well, these are experts in this field, these are tech gurus, these are, you know, whatever. But, you know, remember, the left, the expert is whoever goes off and promotes whatever the left wants to promote, regardless of the facts and the evidence. They go off and they find people who are willing to, you know, for any amount of money, push whatever the left wants. You know, and these are a bunch of anti-liberty tyrants. So they fill it up with a bunch of propagandists, try to give themselves a false sense of credibility to pressure Facebook to engage in deeper levels of censorship. And then they try to go off and they try to justify it by saying that Trump was engaging in threats to democracy. Again, the Democrats trying to accuse their opponents that which the Democrats themselves are guilty of. It was the Democrats that attacked democracy. It was the Democrats that attacked our election. And they were able to succeed at it. They were able to get Joe Biden installed in the White House unconstitutionally through illegally and unconstitutionally conducted elections in violation of election laws. All right, so we got that. I mean, that's irrefutable. But because President Trump was trying to go out there and expose what had happened in the election, they're going off and trying to say he was a threat. You know, to the Democrats, the person who exposing the Democrats, they're the threat, not the Democrats who engaged in the crimes and the scandal. And so they fill these groups up with a bunch of hardcore leftists, try to claim they have credibility in order to justify censorship facts to try and keep the people uninformed of what's really going on, because censorship helps push the gaslighting, helps push the propaganda that the left wants to go forth. I mean, think about this. The left are such good propagandists. There's actually a large portion of the population at this point that actually believes there's more than two genders and that you get to pick your gender based off of whatever feeling, and it has no relation to biology. That's how effective the left's propaganda and gaslighting is. And they keep going further and further into crazy town to see how many people will follow them. And because they're going through and they're testing out the effectiveness of the gaslighting censorship combination to being able to control the population. And hopefully, according to the left, the left's hope is to be able to overthrow the Constitution and the current form of government to implement an authoritarian dictatorship in which they rule with unchecked power over every aspect of your life. Now, if Facebook allows so much as one conservative on their platform, the left views that as a threat to their overall goal. And Facebook, even though they've tried setting up this fake independent oversight board, to which they handpick and fund, is not going far enough, or not going far enough fast enough. So now they're creating their own little groups in order to try and pressure Facebook even more. It's all about them being able to get their authoritarian control. And it is really sickening. And so, the next time the Republicans have control, if we're ever able to get control, if we ever have free and fair elections, of course, we'll see what happens with Arizona doing a forensic audit on the election, which is, too little, too late. Yeah, sure, give them all the time in the world to destroy the evidence before you do a forensic audit. And maybe with, now that Trump's out, the Republicans are trying to go off and shore up the election law so the Democrats can't do to them what they did to Trump. Maybe we'll get the Republicans back in power. Of course, the results of the census helped. But what we need to do here is we need to completely rewrite Section 230 to end online censorship, end viewpoint discrimination in the algorithms, and end them picking and choosing. What they need to do is say, hey, you can't treat any content differently. The algorithm has to be viewpoint neutral. And the platform has to allow anybody, as long as it's not criminal, you can't censor it. You can't shadow ban it. You can't manipulate your algorithms to derank it in the search results. You can't do any of that. But also, if you allow one person to monetize through some revenue sharing program from advertisements, you have to allow everybody, including the person who only has an audience of one. Right? They need to do that, and they need to go off and make sure that if the Democrats were to try and get in control, that if the tech tyrants try to re-engage in censorship, that they lose their Section 230 protection altogether, and that anybody can sue them for violating Section 230, for being a publisher rather than a platform. In fact, I think there is a very strong case for that right now, where if anybody says anything bad about you, slanders you in any way on Facebook, you should be able to sue Facebook because they have proven that they are a publisher and not a platform. Okay, so one more thing to go off here, and that is Biden continues to try and take credit for the vaccines, the distribution plan, and for the fact that COVID is now going away. So we'll go ahead and take a look at what Biden is saying, and then we'll go ahead and expose what the actual facts are. Take a look.
2 months until July 4th. I'm here to report that we're in our vaccination program where we are, and what comes next in an effort to get this country back closer to normal. And first, where are we? Well, as everyone knows, I promised that we'd administer 100 million shots in my first 100 days. After we met that goal, we doubled it to a historic 200 million shots. By the time we reached the 100 days last week, we had shattered that mark with over 220 million shots in arms. And as we stand here today, almost 150 million Americans have gotten at least one shot. Over 105 million Americans are fully vaccinated. And among our most vulnerable populations, seniors, we're nearing 85% of those who've gotten their first shot. 70% of the seniors are now fully vaccinated. It's a dramatic turnaround from where we were in January, when less than 2% of adults and less than 1% of seniors were fully vaccinated. Not only that, cases are down in 40 states these past 2 weeks. Deaths are down dramatically since January.
Now, this is the worst kind of hypocrisy. I mean, I've told you many, many times where the Democrats try to blame the Republicans for the failure of the Democrats and then try to take credit for the successes of the Republicans. And this is another one of those situations. Hereby, when the coronavirus outbreak first happened, Trump was among the first to sound the alarm, issuing warnings, starting to ban travel, telling people, hey, don't be gathering in large crowds. We're going to be trying to work on getting this under control. And the Democrats, including Joe Biden, was out there undermining all the initial efforts, telling people, oh, don't worry, this isn't a big deal. This is a xenophobic overreaction. You know, not only should you continue on with your daily life, but we should make a concerted effort to gather in large numbers. Joe Biden was out there among the Democrats telling people to engage in behavior that would spread the virus as far and wide as possible. And then it was only after the spread of the coronavirus hit critical mass, where any hope of containment was out the door, did Joe Biden change his tune and start going, oh yes, this is serious, and then start attacking President Trump for his response, trying to claim it was, you know, a failure of leadership. So hereby, the Democrats did everything they could to undermine the initial response, undermine the initial attempts to get it under control. The Democrats wanted to make sure it spread as far and wide as possible. Then, with the help of the media, they flipped the script, tried to act like they were the ones that took it seriously, and then tried to blame President Trump for it. Yeah, we've seen this time and time again. You know, this tired playbook whereby, you know, something bad is on the horizon. Democrats do everything they can to undermine the response or the ability to contain it, and then go off and try and blame the Republicans and then take credit for the Republicans' actual response. And so even after, you know, it had spread far and wide, Trump continued to lead the effort on the coronavirus and did something that everybody was saying was completely impossible. Well, impossible for anybody else, but not for the effective leadership of President Trump, who went from outbreak to vaccine in less than a year. What was it, 9, maybe 10 months that he went from outbreak to vaccine, which was unheard of. And he was able to do so with Operation Warp Speed. By the time Trump had left office, we had a vaccine and we had a distribution plan. In fact, distribution was already underway. Now, Joe Biden, who did nothing whatsoever, is trying to take credit. In fact, Joe Biden did worse than nothing. He actually was part of the problem. He was the one out there undermining the response and ensuring that the virus spread as far and wide as possible. Now, Joe Biden's trying to take credit for a vaccine that was already created and handed to him on a silver platter by the previous administration, and the distribution of the vaccine, which was already underway. Again, the distribution plan handed to Joe Biden on a silver platter. Now, Joe Biden's trying to go off and talk about the numbers, you know, where we are today versus where we are January. By the time we got the vaccine and got it distributed, Trump had, 4 weeks of distribution? And Joe Biden's out there saying, hey, you know, in 100 days, I got more people vaccinated than Trump did in 21 days or 28 days. Well, no crap. One, you are following Trump's distribution plans, but you may have added another layer or two of bureaucracy, so you've actually slowed down the distribution that would have otherwise take place. You kind of scale down or held back the distribution a little bit with an extra layer of bureaucracy, but at least you didn't tamper or screw it up too much. So Joe Biden, who's adding the layer of bureaucracy, has actually slowed down the distribution of the vaccine, is taking credit because he was able to get more people vaccinated in 100 days than Trump did in 28 days. Maybe there's an alternate reason for that. Trump got the vaccine, Trump created the distribution plan, Trump started the distribution. You slowed down the distribution by adding a layer of bureaucracy, and you're trying to take credit for what's happening now as people are getting vaccinated against COVID and the economy is on the verge of being able to open up. You're taking credit for everything that was handed to you on a silver platter by the previous administration, and you're still refusing to give credit where credit is due. But then again, this is par for the course for Joe Biden. He's been trying to steal credit for other people's work for decades. The amount of times he's been caught plagiarizing and stealing credit for things is unbelievable. So, it's, not surprising that he's trying to take credit for all of the successes of the Trump administration. Trump built a booming economy through his policies. Trump led the effective effort against COVID that led to vaccine and distribution. Biden didn't do any of that. And Biden is now not only trying to take credit for the vaccine and the response to COVID, by just not changing much from what the previous administration handed to him on the silver platter, but then he's going to go out there and try and take credit for the economy. But as the economy starts picking up, as things are reopening, and as we get back to our daily lives, that wasn't Biden. Again, the economic boom that's on the horizon is a direct result of the vaccine and distribution of the vaccine, which was created and implemented by the Trump administration. And because we are still under the Trump tax cuts, and the Biden administration hasn't been able to fill back up all the regulations that Trump had eliminated. Again, Trump policy, we still have lower regulation, lower taxes, and Trump's vaccine and distribution. So again, here's a situation where Biden is trying to take credit for everything that was handed to him on a silver platter for things that are still operating under the Trump plan. And of course, the media, will try to act like they're honest and go, well, there's some credit to give to Trump, I guess. But, as we get further and further away from the change of the administration, and we get closer and closer to the next election, the media is going to flip the script and try to say it was all Joe Biden. Even though everything was done before Joe Biden took office, it was done by Trump. They do this all the time. You can see examples of this throughout the decades, where the Democrats implement policy, it fails miserably, they blame the Republicans. The Republicans implement policies, it's widely successful, it helps a lot of people, lifts people out of poverty, creates a booming economy, and the Democrats try to take credit for it. Because they think you're suckers. In fact, they know you're suckers. They got you convinced that there's more than two genders. They got you convinced that a man can be a woman. If they're able to convince you of that, they know they can convince you of anything. And the more and more people that go off and push that, and go along like complete sheep, the more the Democrats realize that, they don't have to worry about facts and science. The truth doesn't matter. We're in a post-truth world, a post-constitutional country. We're in a post-democrat society, a post-democracy. And therefore, it doesn't matter. Whatever they say, they think the people will just eat up because so far people have proved to be pretty stupid, at least on the left. At least a good 40% of the country have proven they're morons who will just regurgitate whatever is spoon-fed to them. All right, so that's it for this episode. I'd like to thank you so much for tuning in, whether you're watching on video or you're listening to the audio version of the podcast. If you want to know, I actually prefer you listen to the audio version of the podcast, but if you like video, then go ahead and watch it on Rumble. If you caught this on YouTube or the video posted on Facebook, I'm not sure how you found it. Must have been an error in their algorithms trying to suppress me. But I would prefer, if you like video, watch me over on Rumble. Yep. 4-year-old starting to stomp around. All right, watch me over on Rumble or get the audio version. All right. So anyways, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, which just means follow. It doesn't cost you anything. Hit the like button, leave me comments, ratings, reviews. If you want to share this, I doubt it. Facebook will allow it to be shared, and I doubt Twitter will, but you can try if they still allow it. But otherwise, you can look in the descriptions below for links to follow me on Parler, Gab, Minds, and MeWe. Thank you so much, and I will be back again soon.